be seen on their in-car cameras. They actually stop and get out of their vehicles, and they stopped several houses from the actual house where the call came from. As they're walking towards the house where the call originated, you can see a white Dodge Charger, I believe, that backs out of the driveway. You can hear the tires squeal. The vehicle then turns in the direction of the officers, accelerates at a high rate of speed, and drives directly at both officers. Both officers realized the threat and fortunately were able to jump out of the way. They did have to jump into the lawn to avoid being struck by this vehicle. The vehicle then is out of the frame of the video camera. The officers then hurriedly head back to their car while reporting over the error that they had just been, someone attempted to run them over. As they get in their cars, you can see that same vehicle traveling back the other direction, again at a high rate of speed. So at this point, our officers go in pursuit of this vehicle, again, that had attempted to run them both over. It is immediately requested that we get our air unit up and a canine to assist with this pursuit because, again, at this point, we have no idea what the call was that we were responding to. Our officers just know that someone tried to run them over in this incident. This pursuit went on for several minutes throughout the neighborhood that we're in. There were several changes of directions, and the suspect driver actually crashed into another car at the intersection of Manchac and William Cannon up the road, and then continued on. Our officers remained in pursuit. The suspect vehicle then turned around and headed back southbound, and at this point, we actually terminated the pursuit based on the actions that had already taken place, and we were still trying to determine what the original call was that we had been requested for. As this was all happening, we had several officers heading into this neighborhood because, again, we had reported the incident that occurred where this individual tried to run over two officers. We had the pursuit, we had the crash that they fled the scene from. Multiple officers were responding. One of our officers responded and was on Manchac down the road from us, and they were attempting to set up spike strips to try and put this pursuit to a stop. What you can see on that officer's in-car camera is you can see the suspect vehicle heading southbound on Manchaca at a high rate of speed, and again, the vehicle crosses over the center line in an attempt to run this officer over. And fortunately, again, this officer was able to jump out of the way and not get struck by this vehicle. The vehicle then goes maybe 100 yards, it's out of control, it hits the curb, it crashes into a telephone pole, and it ends up in a yard right across the street. At this point, the officer broadcasts that the suspect attempted to run him over, and he then begins to approach the vehicle, realizing that it is most likely disabled, and again, we have to find out what's going on. This individual has tried to kill 3 police officers now, and again, came from the house where we still had some type of an unknown disturbance. The officer gets up to the vehicle, and he is at the back of the vehicle. He is giving commands to the driver to show their hands, to put their hands out. Multiple commands are being given. Based on the positioning of the officer's vehicle, again, the officer was here to set up spike strips, and his vehicle was facing northbound. The incident occurred on the other side of the vehicle, so at this point we do not have any video that captures this incident, nor do I think we will once we review everything based on the positions. What the officer has told us in our preliminary understanding is that he was at the rear of that vehicle, and he was giving commands to this driver that had just attempted to run him and others over to show their hands, to get out of the vehicle. The driver ultimately steps out of the vehicle with her back to our officer. He is again giving commands to show their hands. The subject at that point starts looking to the left where there's a wooded area. The officer is at this point thinking there may be a foot pursuit, but ultimately she ends up turning around. The officer said she raises her right hand above her shoulder and has a knife in her hand and begins to come at him at a fast rate of speed, at which point he gives multiple commands to drop, 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 and ultimately he fires his weapon once she is so close that he felt his life was in danger. At that point, he broadcasts that shots were fired, and again immediately begins to render medical assistance. The subject did die ultimately of those wounds on the scene, even though our officers and EMS provided medical care. What also was happening simultaneously, after the individual tried to run over the officer and he was approaching the vehicle, making contact, what is on our 911 tapes, there is a broadcast from our dispatch that is advising the officer that they have received a call that this individual is attempting to commit suicide by cop. They broadcast that saying that she is attempting to commit suicide by cop, and it is 2 seconds later that our officer broadcasts that shots have been fired. So in the time it would take for him to pull out his radio and broadcast that shots had been fired, these were likely all happening in the very same moment that broadcast was being put out as the encounter took place. So that's what the circumstances that we have right now are. That's what we understand has happened to this point. This is still a very active scene, as you all can tell. We haven't even begun to process the scene itself. So that will take several hours into the night to where we will have to go in there and again process the scene, search the scene, and locate whatever evidence that we can within that scene. There are multiple investigations going on, as in all officer-involved shootings. The district attorney's office is here, as I mentioned earlier, and they are conducting an investigation along with our special investigations unit to determine the legality of the actions here from a criminal perspective. And then our own internal affairs division is here, along with the Office of Police Monitor, and they're conducting an internal investigation for administrative compliance with policy. So those are the investigations that are ongoing. The officer involved in this incident has been with the Austin Police Department for 4 years, and he will be placed on administrative leave, as is our standard practice in all officer-involved shootings. And again, I just want to close with the same thing that I opened with, that although the circumstances tonight were tragic, and although this individual attempted to run over several police officers, it is with a heavy heart that I do give the deepest condolences to her family. Again, a young woman, 25 years old, with just really tragic circumstances tonight.